potential pitfalls. There's one. It's not supposed to pop out at you, but that's an easy one, right? What are some others? All right, what does this one mean? What are some, I mean, you're taking money out of the country. What? You're removing money. You're selling stocks. What are some of the problems? I heard of some of them before. Joel?
Well, obviously one of the issues is that you might be taking out money that might be going to civilian services, food, and medical
Good.
care.
Innocent civilians, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of industries there, humanitarian, agriculture. If you're taking money out of the country, if I say I'm divesting from Sudan, and I take money from companies with any ties to Sudan, there's going to be some collateral damage, big time. Good. Then,
I guess if you pull all the money out of Sudan, and Sudan just decides it's going to get angry too and put all of its money into the military, I mean, they're already putting 70%, 80% in, but they'll keep that much money going to the military, and less is going to anything else. Not only just like innocent civilians, but actually like the maintenance of the country, the oil they have, anything.
well, quickly to that, so the first two things, it's not actually, it's Sudan's, they're debt ridden, so they need this type of investment. So they can't afford they can't extract and sell the oil themselves. They need companies to come in to do that. So ultimately, as far as that revenue stream, those companies hold the cards. As far as this is something that's been, and we'll get to it maybe one if someone else can answer. I mean, you're going to, if Sudan cares about money, you piss them off, are they going to take the thing off, take it out on the people of Sudan? That's a legitimate question, but to the point where my response, and I got this recently, was, well, I could argue back that any type of pressure on the Sudanese government could result, non-economic, could result in them being angry and taking it out on the people of Sudan. But the point, I think, is that it's reached the point, genocide, where it really can't get much worse. So, in divestment, right, where, operating procedure says it's a tool of the last resort. I mean, are of the utmost extreme cases, and genocide is one of those. More problems. Let's get them all out.
Unemployment? Would that go with the
Unemployment, yep. Industry employs people. Good. Unemployment.
Well, they're one of our intelligence partners, and if they already had Osama bin Laden there, maybe they'll foster more terrorists and work against us.
Yep, that's another one. I mean, there's always, I think that relates to the idea of, we want them to do something. Any more pressure on them at all could have them do worse things. I mean, that's definitely something to consider. So we've got the innocent civilians, so innocent people. Another big one is the cost, right? I mean, that's something it's tough to consider in the face of genocide, but it serves, these portfolios serve an important purpose. They pay your retirement. I mean, that's an important thing. I mean, why, we can argue genocide, you can't, it's apples and oranges, and they're both important things that we have to consider. And that's something we've done, and we'll talk about that briefly. So that's that. But anyway, so some of the problems we talked about, innocent civilians, employment, infrastructure. That's why we've developed, we looked at it. The question was, how do we influence the Sudanese government without hurting the poor? And the work we did was to develop this model of targeted divestment. So instead of divesting from Sudan generally, we're divesting from specific industries and specific actors. 90% of my organization's time goes into company research. So we've, over the last year, looked at about 400 plus companies with ties to Sudan and looking at them on a case-by-case basis and plugging them into a criteria for a worst offender. So what basically happens is you end up, what pops out to you is the oil industry, right? As far as employment goes, so things like agriculture we exclude. That's 80% of the workforce in Sudan. The cost, you have to look at a cost-benefit analysis, right? Is the cost of divesting worth the benefit you're going to get? Let's talk about Coca-Cola for a second. Coca-Cola, we've heard, they've been in reports, people have, I remember when this first started, there was like boycott, you didn't really know where they were coming from, but there's always this kind of tenuous connection of Coca-Cola is involved in Sudan. So what are they doing there? And I said before, no U.S. company can operate in Sudan. There are a few exemptions. Coca-Cola is one of those exemptions. They're under a food and beverage exemption. So what Coca-Cola does is they sell syrup. Not a lot of syrup, because there's just, if you look how big Coca-Cola is, to a non-governmental distributor who then takes the syrup, bottles it, and sells it in Sudan. So that's the scope of Coca-Cola's interest in the company, right? So the money stream is Coca-Cola sells syrup, a non-governmental institution in Sudan pays for the syrup, bottles it, and sells it themselves to the people. Government's not involved. That money's not going to the military, right? So so let's think. The cost of divesting from Coca-Cola when it's not going to do anything, that's something you have to look at. It's not worth it. That's the type of thing, if you push, you're going to get a kickback in your face by these people that you're trying to convince. Those are the type of things we look at on a company-by-company basis. Talk to me through our site. We can get you the list of companies, get you thinking about companies and the like. But we're being a bit more general now. That's one thing. As far as employment goes, are the actual oil industry themselves. It's a very exclusive industry. Employment was, if you talk to people that come back, I'm sure Ryan, I mean, I've been told, I've not been to the region, that it's a weird thing that you'll be there in the middle of nowhere and you'll see a truck, China National Petroleum Company in the middle of an African desert, and it will be filled with Chinese workers. I mean, they're bringing in workers and then also employing people from, which we call the immediate government circles, the more developed areas of the country. If any of you read, the New York Times recently came out with a piece that showed basically the difference between life in Khartoum and life in Darfur or Juba, other parts of the country where it's just, it's extreme. And when you think of imbalance, it's right there. Next question is investment returns. So, how do we go about doing this without destroying our portfolios in the process? That's an important consideration. So a number of things that go into it. Basically, certain types of asset classes, so certain types of strategies for divestment, the way they're set up these days, it's impossible to divest from. And they have little exposure to these types of companies to begin with, so it's another cost-benefit analysis. The cost of divesting would force you to not just divest from the companies, but divest completely from those specific asset classes which make up a small part and small exposure, which aren't the bulk of what you're looking for, but the cost of it would be enormous. So those types of things we've considered excluded those things from our portfolio. So the goal was put together a plan, be as effective as possible. So the question is, what do we get targeted divestment? We'll fly through to get to the end and do questions, but basically the model, how does it work with your state? So as I mentioned, we've developed a criteria for what makes up a worst offending company. 3 parts to that criteria. I'll say them basically. First part is that the company actually has a non-trivial involvement financially in the country. Like I mentioned with Coca-Cola, it's not a big part. No money is not going to Sudan, the military. So we're looking at people that provide substantial revenue to the government of Sudan or substantial business relationship. Second part, that's one. Second part is that the company does not provide substantial revenue to disaffected regions. So let's talk about the South. Recently, another exemption that was made to the U.S. sanctions was President Bush lifted sanctions high on southern Sudan. We'll just plop down anyway. So, lifted sanctions on southern Sudan. We have the government from this North-South agreement, government of South Sudan. One question that someone might be thinking was a lot about the, who knows about the CPA, the agreement between North and South? Becca? Do you know, what was supposed to be set up to be shared after the agreement? No, no? So, power, Jesse, go ahead.
Well, they gave vice presidency to the
political positions?
To the leader of the SPLM. And
what else?
Supposed to share oil
revenue. Good. Supposed to share oil revenues. Now, when you think that, because I drew that map before, I'm going to throw it up there again. Embarrass myself. Okay, here's the terrible map. It's even worse this time. Here's before we get to this, oil fields, bulk of the oil fields, right? So when you hear share oil revenue, you think north-south, share oil revenue. It's pretty simple, right? Well, the first step that had to be done was draw a boundary, right? Where do you draw the line? Because before Khartoum controlled everything. They got all the oil revenue. So where do you draw the line? Now, if you were not part of Khartoum or the government, and you had to draw a line, and you said geographically, based on history, ethnicity, where would you draw the line? You draw it here. Now the line was drawn not there, but here. So a lot of the big oil field blocks went north of the line. You say, okay, that's a little unfair, but you're still splitting everything 50-50. No, the way the CPA is written, everything south gets split 50-50. Everything north goes 100% to Khartoum. Gets worse. Power sharing. Government post, some are supposed to go to Khartoum, some are supposed to go to the south. There's 2 posts in particular that are important to the oil industry in Sudan. It's the Ministry of Finance, and then there's the Ministry as it relates to oil. Khartoum is adamant that neither of those industries go to the southern Sudanese government.